So there's been a lot of conversation over whether or not Donald Trump is going to be pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell. So let's see what all is going on here. This is insane to me that somebody who is known to be part of a major pedophile ring and got sent to jail because of it might stick around. So let's
agreement with Jeffrey Epstein that they say.
Okay.
Convicted Epstein co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell is now appealing to the Supreme Court just days after sitting down with the DOJ. Maxwell's legal team argues that the government has a, quote, obligation to honor a non-prosecution agreement with Jeffrey Epstein that they say protects her from any criminal charges. This comes after this comes just hours after President Trump maintained that he's allowed to pardon Maxwell, even though nobody's asked him about it. Take a listen.
Well, I'm allowed to give her a pardon, but nobody's approached me with it. Nobody's asked me about it. I never had the privilege of going to his island, and I did turn it down, but a lot of people in Palm Beach were invited to his island. In one of my very good moments, I turned it down. I didn't want to go to his island.
Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche met with Maxwell.
I never had the privilege of going to his island. I never had the privilege. I feel like that's a very weird way to describe that, sir. If opportunity to fuck all the little girls you could want is seen as a privilege, that is a red flag to me. Oh my god. Go back to where we were. Thank you. Loki the Thrive Church says privileged. Yeah, that's the part that's confusing me too.
Is now appealing to the any criminal charges. This comes after this comes just hours after President Trump maintained that he's allowed to pardon Maxwell, even though nobody's asked him about it. Take a listen.
Well, I'm allowed to give her a pardon, but nobody's approached me with it. Nobody's asked me about it. I never had the privilege of going to his island, and I did turn it down, but a lot of people in Palm Beach were invited to his island. In one of my very good moments, I turned it down. I didn't want to go to his island.
Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche met with Maxwell for 9 hours last week in Florida. Sources tell ABC News that she initiated the meetings and received limited immunity for the statements that she made. So for more on this, I want to bring in our congressional correspondent, Jay O'Brien, who covers Capitol Hill. And Jay, first, can you break down this appeal for us?
Yeah, so this is Ghislaine Maxwell and her attorneys going to the U.S. Supreme Court to essentially say that her conviction should be tossed out because she was covered, they argue, under a 2007 non-prosecution agreement that Jeffrey Epstein reached with the U.S. government and specifically the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida. The way that this agreement came together is that federal prosecutors, again, this is in 2005 to 6 to 2007, went to Jeffrey Epstein and said that if you pled guilty to state charges and you registered as a sex offender, the government would prosecute you for federal charges, and therefore they give him this non-prosecution agreement, which doesn't just name Jeffrey Epstein, but it also names alleged co-conspirators, both named and unnamed in this non-prosecution agreement. So what Ghislaine Maxwell says is, okay, that non-prosecution agreement that the government reached with Epstein in 2007 also applies to me. That's the argument she's giving to the United States Supreme Court.
I mean, I agree with that, actually. That would apply to her as well, but man, that feels so skeezy. Kaleem Wiley says, please tell me you have audio of Trump admitting that the people Epstein poached from his spa were underage girls. I don't have that audio on hand, but if you have that, by all means, send it to me. We'll take a listen to it.
Now, what the federal government has said in the past is that because Ghislaine Maxwell wasn't a party to that agreement, firstly, it doesn't apply to her. And even if this agreement did apply to her, the argument they've made in the past is that because it was struck in Florida, in the Southern District of Florida, it doesn't apply to these charges that were brought against Jeffrey Epstein and ultimately Ghislaine Maxwell in 2019 and onward in New York, a different U.S. Attorney's Office. So that's what's no doubt going to be haggled in front of the United States Supreme Court if the Supreme Court ultimately does take this case, Alex, and it's still a big if.
Well, and Jay, Republican Thomas Massie and Democrat
Okay.
Ro Khanna are some of the loudest voices in Congress demanding transparency. Here's what they said yesterday on This Week. Take a listen.
I think we should get a lot more than just the book. Let's get the financial records of the estate. Follow the money. It's hard to believe that she herself and Epstein did these crimes by themselves, right?
Yeah.
So it's time to find out who else was involved.
Okay.
I have skepticism.
Okay, that's actually a decently good point. It's impossible for just two people. I mean, I guess it's possible, but it's improbable that just two people were involved in this, given its scope. So there should be far more people who are in trouble as a result of this. So, what should happen? We should be seeing those people and they should be ran through the courts, right?
Given she was indicted of perjury, given she has a motive for getting a pardon, and I'm concerned about restoring justice for the victims.
Well, and Jay, I think the big question here is, can Congress actually force the administration to do anything here?
They can if they passed legislation to this effect. And there's a bill, one is Ro Khanna's bill, one is Thomas Massie's bill, but they've said they would support one another as well, that would compel the release of the records that the Department of Justice has that relate to Jeffrey Epstein. And Thomas Massie will tell you that he's also got the buy-in from 12 or so hardline Republicans who have signed on as co-sponsors to his legislation. So ultimately, if this bill were to be pushed procedurally out onto the House floor for a vote, it could pass with a big chunk of Democrats and those 12 or so hardline Republicans. But I say, Alex, that it'd have to be pushed procedurally because Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican leadership who control the floor, have seemed to signal that they would not support putting this legislation on the floor because it would compel the administration to do something that Speaker Johnson argues the administration is already doing. Obviously, Thomas Massie doesn't buy into that argument. So what he and Ro Khanna would have to do is do something called a discharge petition, which would essentially force this bill onto the floor against the wishes of leadership. They would need the support of all House Democrats, and again, a pretty big, significant chunk of House Republicans to actually push this bill out onto the floor. And the quickest they could do that would be September, because the House is out on recess until the late summer.
Yeah, very interesting timeline there. Jay O'Brien, I appreciate that.
Okay.
Americans do have a sunnier
So
outlook.
is there anything else here that we need to care about right now? See, Jess says, yes, they can, but you have to get a majority of Congress to say we do not support pedophiles. We also need to make sure that these bills don't make their way into pork fat bills. Because a thing that we've seen before is Congress will have an incentive that they really want to push through, but they attach it to a budget bill. They attach it to some other important or unimportant bill, and people end up voting against the thing that they need. Like, what was the last one? It was like a cryptocurrency bill that had the Epstein file stuff attached to it. That kind of shit is agitating and should be an argument against pork fatting. The article here ends saying, no one's above the law, not even the Southern District of New York. Our government made a deal and it must honor it. The United States cannot promise immunity with one hand in Florida and prosecute with the other in New York. President Trump built his legacy in part on the power of a deal, and surely he would agree that when the United States gives its word, it must stand by it. We are appealing not only to the Supreme Court, but to the president himself to recognize how profoundly unjust it is to scapegoat Maxwell for Epstein's crimes. She's not getting scapegoated for Epstein's crimes, though. She was an active participant in his crimes. There's a difference. What? You're not a scapegoat if you're one of the people making it happen. Jesus Christ. That is insane to me. No one's above the law except for current sitting presidents. Jesus. Colleen Millie says, script news title, Trump says Epstein hires young woman from his Mar-a-Lago spa. Now let's take a look at this one. Script news. Let's see if this has what we are looking for. Oh. And of course, once again, we have Dorito as well getting some of this information for us at the same time. So,
were some of the... Mr. President, Epstein has a certain reputation, obviously. I'm just curious, were some of the workers that were taken from you, were some of them young women?
Were some of them?
Were some of them young women?
Well, I don't want to say, but everyone knows the people that were taken. And it was the concept of taking people that work for me is bad. But that story's been pretty well out there. And the answer is yes, they were.
Yes, they were young women?
What did they do? In the spa.
In the spa?
Yeah, people that work in the spa. I have a great spa, one of the best spas in the world at Mar-a-Lago. And people were taken out of the spa, hired by him. In other words, gone. And other people would come and complain, this guy is taking people from the spa. I didn't know that. And then when I heard about it, I told them, I said, listen, we don't want you taking our people, whether it was spa or not spa. I don't want him taking people. And he was fine, and then not too long after that, he did it again, and I said, out of here.
Mr. President, did one of those stolen, persons, that include Virginia Jeffrey?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah. He stole her. And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know. None whatsoever.
By the way, she had no complaints about us. Just so you know. Just so we're aware. No problems with us at all. Jesus Christ. So that was from today? Stolen, the word is kidnapped. People are kidnapped. So, when she's saying people were stolen from our spa, are they talking about effectively, hey, this person got headhunted and offered a job? Or are they literally talking about kidnapping? I don't doubt it's the latter, but that's still a wild concept to me. He sounds like Kent Hovind talking about, he pulled a Kanye. I don't want to say, but yes. So they're talking about job headhunting? Okay, so they're not talking about... So I was worried that was a literally Trump going, okay, you kidnapped a few young women, but not anymore, bozo. Not on my watch. You've kidnapped enough young girls. 20 is fine. You can make do with 20. A lot of things you can do with 20 of them. You don't need more of them, Jeffrey. Not anymore. 'Cause that... Otherwise, that's way weirder, right? Bregman says, I think he feels the young women working for him were property. I mean, I don't doubt that. Hearing what this guy thinks is basic locker room talk basically solidifies that for me. He does see women as objects. But nobody loves them more than he does. And his friend Jeffrey Epstein, he loves women too. But they're a bit on the younger side. When the proposed job turns out to be human trafficking cargo, does it not become kidnapping? Oh, well, definitely. Miralana says, yes, it was the headhunting thing, but the important thing is that it demonstrates the break with Epstein wasn't over sexual stuff. He stopped being friends over real estate and worker stuff. Yep. Jesus Christ. This timeline is wild and filled with evil.
Epstein has a certain reputation, obviously. I'm just curious, were some of the workers that were taken from you, were some of them young women?
Were some of them?
Were some of them young women?
Well, I don't want to say, but
Guys, I think the president might be a
everyone
bad
knows
guy.
The people that were taken, and it was the concept of taking people that work for me is bad, but that story's been pretty well out there, and the answer is yes, they were.
Yes, they were young women?
What did they do? In the spa.
In the spa?
Yeah.
Why did Trump have a 17-year-old hired as a masseuse?
In the world at Mar-a-Lago, and people were taken out of the spa.
Because he also likes women on the younger side.
Done. And other people would come and complain, this guy is taking people from the spa. I didn't know that. And then
That's because Trump would argue it's not pedophilia, actually.
Whether it was spa
It's
or not
hebephilia.
Spa. I don't want him taking people. And he was fine, and then not too long after that, he did it again, and I said, out of here.
Just so you know, it's actually hebephilia.
That include Virginia Jeffrey?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah. He stole her. And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know. None whatsoever.
He stole her. He stole her. Again, is it weird to talk about people as if you stole them when they're supposed to have, you know, rights? Lenari says ebophilia. That's what weird libertarians keep telling me. Whenever I mention that it's weird for somebody who's 40 or 50 to date somebody who's 16 or 17. How's it going, Rhyme Jack? Razor says he would commit incest if it were legal, although how do we know he didn't anyway? I know I referenced the Epstein file, or not the Epstein files, the Dresden Files a lot on this show. Because they're a good series of books, but there is a moment where one of the villains, Nicodemus, meets with Dresden for the first time. And the first thing he does when he meets him is he makes out with his daughter in front of Dresden. And that scene always made me feel really fucking weird. Dorito Dave says, libertarians aren't talking about ebophilia. They're talking about how oppressive car seat laws are for their girlfriends. Oh, Jesus. Jesus. I think I can leave this area now. For now. God, it's weird having a pedophile rapist as a president. And half the country being okay with him being a pedophile rapist. Not a man who rapes pedophiles, but like a pedophile who is also a rapist. In the grand scheme of things, he is. Stop says Suris just can't pronounce ebophilia. I don't know. I don't come in contact with this word enough in my everyday life to see it in any other context besides some weird fucker posted about it on Twitter. If I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, I feel like that's more of a green flag than anything. Razor says it isn't half the country, though. Yes, it is. They voted for him. I'm not counting the people who... Actually, no. I will count the people who did not vote. So it's more than half the country who are okay with this. Because more than half the country decided that it was not worth their time to stop him. I can count the non-voters. You just aren't going to like how I count them. Bragwin says, my brother's church is full on declaring that Trump is both weak and human and tempted by the flesh. Simultaneously, what man wouldn't partake of such fruits? Dorito Dave says, I'm technically counted as the non-voters. Dave, why are you okay with such horrible things happening in our country? Why didn't you do something to stop them? Including the ones on the internet that insisted that voting is useless? Yeah, them too. Fuck them. If voting was useless, places wouldn't spend millions of dollars to stop votes from happening. Because felons are counted as non-voters in those counts? Then at that point, my argument is not, you should have voted. At that point, my argument is, why do we have a broken fucking country? So just careful how you word that. There's those who say it's easiest to count on people when they aren't moving. Okay. What in the world does that topic have to do with the inability to form blood clots? Oh wait, I was like 3 minutes behind live. Just as it all started in 1700s. Rhyme Jack said, voting isn't the only solution. I, for instance, have also maintained a hex on Congress, where their socks are always wet and annoyed my elected officials. Look, voting is the bare minimum. There are some situations where I can understand if somebody could not vote. Not in the general election, though. Dude wants me to show him my banana. Show me yours, I'll show you mine. There we go. Okay. Well, that's all we have for that particular topic. That was terrifying. As per usual, there are some absolutely terrible things you can do in these situations. Like, annoy the piss out of your representatives using 5 calls. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the next thing. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I really could not do any of this without all of you. Those of you watching, and especially those of you who support me on Patreon. I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to thank all of you who do that, because with YouTube being what it is these days, I really cannot do this full-time without the support from each and every one of you. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Tales of Atonement, Nixie Chan, Kiri Artemis, Limor Pinku, Love Bunny Games, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Aurora, Leela Ururaka, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. Thank you so very much. But since you're here, why not go ahead and try watching another one? There should be one that's on the screen right now. And if you are a patron of mine, I wanted to go ahead and thank you again for all of your support. There is still a video you could press, though, if you'd like. I would appreciate it just a little bit.